What's going on, everybody? It's your friendly neighborhood shark, back again with another episode of I Found Something Weird on the Internet, and now you need to look at it too. So for today's episode, I really wanted to talk about hobbies. Now, almost everybody has a hobby. Boo's hobby is licking his poopy butthole. And I remember back when GTA 5 came out, which I'm now remembering is 9 years old, which makes me very worried about how old I am. My gosh, it's really been that long, huh? Listen, I know a lot of game devs feel like the games that they make are their babies, but I gotta tell you, you really don't gotta keep that little thing around for 18 years, but maybe they just didn't get the memo. Now, one of the big things that I did in GTA 5 when I wasn't out terrorizing the citizens of Los Santos, I collected cars. Rare cars, to be specific, cars with low spawn rates. I remember getting the Sultan and a chromed out hearse and all that sort of really fun stuff. And then you can flex your cars to a bunch of other people who you never know and will never meet, but boy was it fun. And collecting has been a massive subsection of the hobbies that people like to do. I mean, these days I collect plants. And while those little boys are fun, I think everyone should have one. Not everybody agrees, and they collect much different things. Much different things. Now, I don't want to make fun of people's hobbies, okay? As a member of an oppressed group on the internet, I don't want to put that on anybody else. My status as a gamer has been used against me so many times that, I understand what it's like for people to hate you for just who you are. People pick on me all the time as an easy target. I'm neurodivergent, I'm a Twitch streamer, I'm a minority, gamer, POC, I have a Twitter account. So I get it, but I gotta tell you guys, I can't let this one slide. So what happened is that I was on my Twitter account, a problem. I know. I came across this Twitter post about a TikToker who was telling everybody about his hobby that not many people have heard of because it's pretty underground. You get it? Bones. So as you see, we have entered the Bone Zone with the host of the Nightmare Tonight, John, who runs the TikTok account, JonsBones. He was posting regularly on his TikTok, and he also has a business. We'll be talking about that in a second. So this is the video that took off for John.
Waiting for cops to come, found some bones in my wall. Are they human? I don't fucking...
No, they are not. This is what a real human vertebrae looks like. If you can compare them to what's in the video, they are very different. Spines are the most common bones naturally found in the wild, so I highly recommend you learn up on human anatomy. That way you could better identify them.
Now, some of you more observant frogs out there may have noticed something really interesting in his video. Namely, the massive wall of skulls accompanied by the massive wall of spines. So obviously there are other frogs out there who are very perceptive, just like you. Good job. I'm proud of you. Saying things like, okay, maybe the cops need to search your house, Mr. Spine Collector. Whoa. Let's not get the authorities involved just yet. It's just a bunch of spines and skulls, okay? Let's hear them out. But other people have a lot of questions for him, like, why do you have so many spines? And why do you have a spine collection? All, I have to say, are pretty valid questions, but I think this commenter put it best. It's always, why do you have a spine collection? And not, how do you have a spine collection? And today we're going to be answering that question. Now, the dude that we just saw was John Pachea Ferry, or as he likes to call himself, John. And he runs JonsBones, which is the TikTok account with over 500,000 followers. And he's a businessman too. And you may be asking yourself, what does he do?
I'm getting ripped tonight. RIP that. Hi, I'm John and I sell human skulls for a living.
All right, well, that was easy. But it's not the full picture. John not only sells human skulls, he sells
all human bones.
And actually, he is not only New York's largest bone seller, he is one of the country's largest bone seller and distributor to your average person who need to get their hands on some bones as soon as possible. And he likes to promote his business and his love of bones, in which he'll use the word osteology for. We'll touch on that. By chiming in and duetting people talking about bones with his skeleton crew to drop some hot knowledge on your normal person about bones. Now I have to tell you guys, I was a little bit worried about making this video because, I mean, what if he comes after me, man? It's gonna be like real life Plants vs. Zombies, and I can't have that. My troops aren't mobilized. I'm not ready for a full-scale assault. Now, John puts on his website that he got started with his love of bones back when he was a child, when his dad gave him an articulated mouse skeleton. You know, normal things that you get. I remember back when I was a kid, I got a Razor scooter, and some of my friends got like an Xbox 360. He got a dead animal wired up. But this was the catalyst in his life to spark a lifetime curiosity in the study of osteology. Now, with this newfound attention on him, he wanted to answer some of the questions, because people are they're asking why the bone, how the bone, where the bone come from, and he's got to answer the question for the masses, all right? Because his job, as he says, is to destigmatize monetize a stigmatized industry, which is the buying and selling of human bones, which is quite stigmatized, he says. We could all ask ourselves and wonder why, but whatever it is, he's here to fix that. So he dropped a video letting everybody know who he is and what he does. And I have to say, after I saw this video, I was a little interested. I wanted to know what this guy was all about. And I have to say, after a lot of my research, I gotta tell you, John, I got a lot of questions.
Hello, my name is John. And this is my cat, Chonk. I study osteology, primarily specializing in the medical bone trade. And this is how and why I work with osteology for a living. My pride and joy is my human spine collection. And in the US, there's no federal regulation against the ownership, sale, or possession of human osteology, so it's completely legal. I'm making this video to help answer any of the questions that you might have.
At the very end of the video, he said, no federal regulation. Now I have to tell you, here in the US, there are lots of things that we do here with no federal regulation. They don't necessarily make them good. And a lot of things that we thought were illegal weren't, like this. But someone had a question about that, and he responded.
This is actually why I have my channel. I want to talk about human osteology and the studying of skeletal remains. Did you know in the US there's actually no federal regulation against the ownership, sale, or possession of human osteology? There are only 3 states that have restrictions on it. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Now I gotta tell you guys, when you ask someone about their hobby and they always tell you that it's legal, they're always trying to reaffirm to you that it's legal. It's legal. Hey, it's super legal. Hey, there's no federal regulation against it. Only 3 states ban it. I wonder why. He doesn't get into why, but they do. And I gotta say, I don't discount everything off this, but a good little metric to ask yourself if someone is doing something that's a little sketch is how often they say that what they're doing isn't illegal, okay? Because doing card tricks isn't illegal, even if it should be. Nobody has to be asked or reaffirmed if speedrunning Mario 64 is legal, even if you are a part of the radical left trying to be the fastest hedgehog, getting debunked by brilliant minds who indulge in Petersonian thought. But I gotta tell you guys, this seems less legal and more legally questionable. And it's a really interesting thing. You may have noticed that every time he says this, he says the exact same thing. He has his it's legal speech down to a T. Now, there is one caveat here that you can't own the bones of Native Americans, you know, for like obvious reasons. Probably have something to do with the history, maybe. And in the state of Louisiana, that's one of the 3 states that completely banned the sale of human bones. So that's why a little while ago, the police actually seized a human skull that was being sold by someone in Louisiana on eBay. And obviously the cops wanted to know where the skull came from. It's kind of like an important thing because that's a person. And in their analysis, it showed something that was really interesting. The skull was from a Native American female who was apparently buried in what they assumed to be the lower Mississippi Valley, judging by the sediment that they took off of the skull. So this skull was buried, dug up, cleaned, and was almost sold on eBay, which I think would be a pretty good reason to stop normal people from just randomly buying and selling bones, maybe? But John says no. He wants to make sure that everyone has the opportunity, just like him, to study osteology. And I gotta tell you guys that I just think it's a little weird that I can't even own my own pet African giant snail, the beautiful slimy boy that he is, and this guy can just open a portal to the bone zone and do whatever he wants. It's insane. And once again, speaking of osteology, that's a word that he uses a lot. And once again, osteology is the study of human bones. He put it on his website, responsibly sourced human osteology by JonsBones. Incredible. And even when he has articles written about him, authors say that he's a scientist. So I would imagine that he would have at least some formal study in osteology and human bones, right? No. He actually goes to school at Parsons School of Design, which I would imagine he doesn't do much studying of osteology there. But hey, listen, he still calls himself an expert, and that's great. He runs a business, so he has employees, if this hasn't gotten capitalist enough. In his crew, I would imagine that he has a bunch of people in there who know about osteology, who have studied osteology, who have that authoritative view on it. Let's take a look at the team. All right, would you look at that? We have a chief creative designer. Oh, nice. Oh, that's good. That's good. Communication director. All right, great. Sick. Pog. International relations. Okay, this is the international bone seller. All right, this is the guy getting the good word out about JonsBones across the pond to our European friends. All right, we love that. Huh, that's weird. I didn't see anybody on the crew who is an actual osteologist. Oh, we have Rihanna, the only person here with a degree that's anywhere near osteology, who apparently doesn't even want their face shown, which, you know, normal things, totally not weird. How you don't want to be physically connected to the company in any real way, you know, normal things like that. And apparently they don't even get the bones, they get photographs. And sitting here, they don't even work on the bones themselves that often, they get pictures of it. He DMs her pictures of the bones, and that's how they go over it. That's cool, I guess. Very thorough. I mean, they could do more than that. but he didn't put it in here. Another thing here is that there's no historian on board to analyze the bones, to put them in a place in history to make sure that they don't have anything from, a weird place in history. But I don't know. Maybe it just wasn't in the budget. Who knows? Because when he blew up on TikTok and he had a bunch of people scrutinizing who he is and what he does, he wiped it. He wiped the entire team, except for him, who, once again, doesn't have any study in osteology at all.
So JonsBones has caused a lot of controversy lately, and I thought I would add my 2 cents, not only as a historian, but as someone who also collects the macabre. I have a wet specimen leech and a piece of vertebrae that I found myself as proof of this. So that's the perspective I'm going for. Admittedly, I followed JonsBones for almost a year now. I found him on Instagram, and as someone who loves the macabre, who collects oddities, not human remains, I do enjoy having things like that pop up on my feed, and I didn't actually look at his website until yesterday, and I have some regret there. So right away, with the sheer amount of bones that he is selling, I am very surprised that there's not any historians on board. Even oddity shops that sell just a few human remains will have immense information about where it's from, who it's from, and how it got there. The collectors of these kinds of things often want to know everything they can about it because these people love what they are collecting. They have a love and understanding, and they want to learn about these items. And so the pure soullessness of the information and the lack of information is a little shocking to me. Especially when these bones come from many different places, you're going to need a lot of different experts from different parts of the world. And then there's the religious aspect. Given where some of these bones are claimed to be from, I wonder how many of them are from Muslims like myself. And if these are Muslims, then the fact that the remains aren't facing Mecca is a huge problem. I studied ethnography and not particularly anything to do with burial practices, but that is something that's really important to know, especially when it comes to the morality on if you should sell that bone or not. How is it supposed to be preserved or taken care of in its afterlife? You need these sorts of contexts before you even decide to purchase them for your collection or to sell to others.
What a guy. How interesting was that? Now I talk about a historian being important for this team because he says himself that he doesn't work with any modern bones.
Let's talk about it. All of the human osteology that we have here at JonsBones comes from the medical bone trade. Now this trade spanned from 1918 to 1985. So this is a common misconception that we have at JonsBones, is that we are working with modern skeletal remains. And this is not true. All of the bones we work with are either considered vintage or antique.
1918 to 1985. Must have been a very interesting time for a lot of countries. I do have to say, I wouldn't necessarily call 1985 antique. Some African countries haven't even been free from colonial rule for that long, but whatever, right? It's important to understand that there was a lot of oppression going on around the world by a lot of colonial forces on other countries. And that's something that we just don't talk about too much when it comes from stuff that comes from some of these countries, like India, like China, like Africa, or even Latin America. Lots of European museums have been under increased pressure over the years about a lot of their collections and how they're stolen from a lot of these places that were under colonial rule, and people really want them to give them back to the cultures where they were, made and stolen from. They want it back. So I would just say, I think it would be really important to make sure that you know where these bones came from and what happened to them, because these are people. They're human beings. Now, John has a part of his website in which he openly asks random people to sell him bones. He talks a lot how he gets some bones through normal places like Instagram DMs and people just shooting him messages about, hey dog, I just got some bones laying around. You want a piece? And he's like, hell yeah, bro, give me them bones. And he makes sales like that, which can be a little scuffed. They can be a little sketch. All right. And someone had a question for him about it because he says that he gets all of his bones from the medical bone trade. But if he's buying like this, how do you ensure that that's where these bones really came from?
This is a great comment. I wanted to elaborate on this. Previously in my videos, I stated that I source my bones from medical supply companies such as Clay Adams. But these companies were started in 1920 and most of them don't exist anymore. These companies had regular pamphlets and catalogs you could sign up where you could buy thousands of human remains. This is an example of one here. In these pamphlets, you could buy pediatric skulls, fetal skeletons, and regular human skulls. And anyone could buy them. Until 1960, it was cheaper to buy real bones than plastic bones. Since the doctors that purchased these skeletons during their time in medical school have passed away, the majority get inherited. This is a skeleton I purchased from a family whose father was a doctor. It had severe damage on the ribs and the face because the kids used to play with it as a toy. But they recently just had a new child, and then after a couple of years, it started scaring the child. Museums didn't want to take it because these bones never come with paperwork. So that's where we come in. We purchase them from individuals that usually inherit skeletons, and we do our best to sell them back to the medical community.
John, museums won't take these bones back. And I would imagine that museums would have a plethora of resources to determine where these bones may have came from, and have historians and archaeologists and anthropologists and osteologists, all of the ologists on board to wrangle up and throw at these bones to figure out where they came from if they want to take them in. And they don't want them. They don't want to touch them. They don't want to be anywhere near these bones, actually. And that's where he comes in. He closes that gap. Because these stinky museums don't want to touch these guys with no paperwork. So he's going to take the sketchy bones with no paperwork, while saying he only gets bones from the medical bone trade. But these bones don't have any paperwork, so it's kind of hard to figure out if all of them are from the medical bone trade. But whatever. We'll cross that bridge. Oh, we already crossed the bridge. Oh, we just kept going? Okay. He spent on this on his website because he has a little page where he kind of has like a blog where he talks about things that are on his mind when it comes to selling bones on the market. And he wrote this article in response to people saying that there is no need and no wants for these type of bone sellers who take these bones and try to resell them to, he said, medical institutions, but anybody with a credit card can just buy them randomly off the site. Let's hear about it. Private collectors fill a gap in the preservation of human osteology. Whether or not people approve of human osteology, it exists, it has a purpose, and needs to be preserved for future generations to learn from. Due to the lack of new medical osteology being provided for the continuation of medical research, we must treat the existing pool of bones as precious. Private collectors step up to fill a need that institutions currently cannot. Due to either lack of funding or lack of space, many of these pieces exist in the public market. By collecting human osteology, private individuals are ensuring the survival of it. Human osteology is not inexpensive. It is a costly endeavor, and few people look at these items as disposable. By taking in these items, private collectors are making sure that these pieces will survive. Okay, so we've bounced from these institutions don't want them because they don't have paperwork to they don't want them because they don't have room or space. Which one is it? I would imagine there would be like some amount of mix of both, but I'm pretty sure the overwhelming majority of these really don't want to take a lot of these bones in because they have no clue where they've come from at all. So that's the reason why he says he collects and then sells them back, not necessarily to institutions, since apparently they don't want to take them or can't take them, as he says, so he sells them back to just regular ass people. And on his website, he says another thing again. We began with the question, why are bones and human osteology seen as taboo? I wonder why, John. The ability to study skeletal remains is often thought to be reserved for those in labs or historical professions. Not everyone has the same access to museum medical collections and artifacts that explain and cultivate the science behind human bones. We fight to create an environment that not only prioritizes education, but informs customers and defeats social stigmas. So now we're saying that we collect and sell these bones, not for keeping them as history or trying to make sure that they get back into the hands of actual medical professionals, but now it's just we want to democratize the ownership of human bodies. Listen, John just thinks it's time to give back to the city of Gotham, okay? For too long in their ivory towers, doctors and archaeologists and medical professionals have been hoarding these bones, all right? He is the bone socialist, all right? He is the modern day bone Marx, all right? And he's here to make sure that the average man, the common man, is able to get their hands on some bones as soon as possible. And he won't stop until every pot in every home has a bone in it. What a guy. So he throws out all these excuses for why he says he needs to keep the bones and why he's so important. Other collectors like him are so important, and fill in the gap that needs to be filled. I think one of the really big reasons why we don't want just regular normal people to be owning these bones is because they don't treat them with respect and dignity. We're not sure if the random public is going to be scrupulous with how they collect these bones and how they use these bones. Because remember, these are people. this is someone's family member out here. Every single one of these bones came from a living, breathing person who, more likely than not, wants their body to be handled responsibly and handled ethically. And when you just sell to the first person who has the most amount of money to throw at you, and then you dip it and ship it and throw it off to them, you can't know how they're going to use those bones. You don't know what they're going to do. You can't keep hold of that. There's no oversight. It's just gone. Someone could be walking around their apartment butt ass naked with their dick in someone's skull's eye socket, just walking around and swinging that thing because it's fun. I don't like that. I don't want that. And I don't think that the person who that is would want that either, or their family members. And it makes it even a little bit more sketch because even though a lot of medical schools do have bones, there's a shortage of bones and bodies for a lot of these institutions. And a study was done in 2016 and 17, which showed that out of 165 countries, unclaimed bodies remained at 26% or 31% of the amount of bones that they have. Now, you may be asking, what is an unclaimed body? Well, they found it. They were just walking around one day and you're like, oh, a body. Don't mind if I do. You snooze, you lose. You move your feet, you lose your seat. It's mine. And so they take these bodies up, they clean them, and they ship them out to medical institutions around the world. How altruistic. Now, one more thing is that I love consent. I'm a big consent boy, I eat consent in the morning. I pee consent in the midday. I sleep dreaming about consent at night. That's how I love to live my life, okay? I'm a big consent boy. And I think it's really important, the consent of these people, for when you're using them for these things, instead of just letting them rest and be buried somewhere. And if you don't have that, that becomes a really big issue when it comes to respect and dignity of that person. And John has thought about this, all right? He's thought about this, how he responsibly takes care of these bodies, all right? And makes sure that they are treated with respect and dignity. He answered a question about it.
Hello. First, this is my showroom. They're different spaces from where I actually sleep. There's no physical smell to bone. That doesn't bother me at all. I don't view these skulls as scary in any way because I understand what they are. They are important pieces of history that forward education. They are to be treated with respect and dignity. I specialize in medical history relating to the medical bone trade, and because I understand what they are, I am not afraid of it. So that's how I sleep at night, even though I know I work with human remains for a living.
Oh, thank you, John. I was really wondering what that room smelled like. I still don't think it smells good. I will tell you that. It probably smells like the spirits of the long forgotten, waiting to be released from their calcium cocoons to be free from this world, finally move on to the spirit realm, something along those lines maybe. They are to be treated with respect and dignity. That's what he said. Those are his words. And I would say personally, I think it's really important to make sure that he gets these bones ethically. But there's a really big problem is that John doesn't like the E word, all right? We don't say the E word in this house. Ethically, he doesn't like it. He wrote an article about it actually. At JonsBones, we say responsibly sourced because our bones are certified bones from the medical bone trade. The people they belong to made an agreement to have their bones used for that purpose. We do not deal in bones taken from grave sites, catacombs, ossuaries, or anywhere other than the medical bone trade. Ethics are inherently debatable. In the bone trade, saying that the skeleton was sourced ethically can mean many things. Perhaps it was obtained without the organism suffering, or the animal was not killed for the purpose of making a trophy. Maybe it was used for the meat trade, or died of natural causes. Ethically sourced can mean so many things, and it becomes vague and unwieldy. We're not talking about animal bodies here. We're talking about human bodies. All right, I may be a beast in the sheets, but we're still people. No, I personally don't think that the word ethically is too wildly crazy here. Sure, it can mean a lot of different things, but if there was a person and they willingly signed themselves over to be a skeleton used for medical research, as he says those are the only skulls that he has, you would imagine that it would be very ethically sourced, right? But apparently there are some problems in there. We like to dodge around the E word. We like responsible. We're responsible as we can be, I guess. It kind of makes you think that maybe Instagram DMs aren't necessarily the best place to source the bones. You gotta dodge around the E word like that. But hey, listen, John collects these bones for a living. I imagine he always treats these bones as responsibly as possible, right? Hey, remember that video that we played earlier? You may not have noticed it, but in the skeleton in the video behind John, you may have noticed that it had money in its mouth. My man's really putting those dollar bills that he gets from selling these people's bodies to work. And if you're wondering if that really was a dollar bill, don't worry, because there's a really up close shot that you can see. And yes, it is money.
The most notable differences in skeleton articulations is actually the sternum preparation. Here we have an old skeleton from around 1910 to 1930, and this is the original cartilage that used to connect the sternum to the ribs.
Someone asked him, why do you have money in these skeletons' mouths? And he said, this one was a stripper. Ahaha, so funny. Now they do put paper or some cushioning in between the skeleton's teeth, so if something happens, they get rattled around, the teeth won't clickety-clack against each other and chip a tooth, because, you know. But I gotta say that throwing the money around in the skeleton's mouths and, you know, dressing them up with it all real cute, like give them a little like paper origami hat, necessarily isn't the most respectful thing to do with someone's dead body. I just got, that's just me. Oh yeah, and there's that time that he used the bones as props to sell his merch. Just, you know, little window dress in there to spice things up. Oh, how cool. Oh, and he has some other money in these skeletons' mouths, you know, just normal things. It's funny, it's kooky, that's his thing, you know? He's wacky, he's out there. Ooh, oh, there goes, using the skulls as props. Ahaha. Oh, dude, so educational, so funny. I swear, dude, one of these days he's gonna post a TikTok of him bowling with one of these skulls, like Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy.
Okay, guys, I found the ball. What? No, I am not your bowling ball, you stupid! Steer right, here we come!
Now, remember when I told you that it's illegal to buy and sell Native American skulls? It is, and that's great. The big problem is that it's Native American skulls and not any other type of native skull. And, you know, there'd be no real reason for me to bring it up, because why in the world would our good boy John ever stoop so low and not do enough research to ever want to sell a native skull? Oh my gosh. So if you take a look at the skull really quick. Oh no. This is not good. This is not good. This specimen is a skull prepared as a teaching tool for medical students. Oh, how nice. He did say he only sells medical skulls. It features markings and labels from previous ownership, including a wooden tag that says Laplander, which is a term that was used to refer to the Sami people that is now regarded as derogatory. This skull has now found its way from an educational device to the public market, responsibly sourced, beautifully preserved, and thoughtfully selected. This skull is the perfect item for the respectful bone collector or medical student. So wait, let me get this straight. He's selling a native skull from a tribe with a slur used to refer to it on its tag for $1,800 on his website. Responsibly sourced. Listen, responsibly sourced stolen native remains. But hey, listen, it's nobody wants it anymore, right? That's a little awkward now, isn't it? Responsibly sourced. Hey bud, I kind of think they want it back. I kind of think that you shouldn't sell this. And a lot of the people who actually work in fields where they do handle human bodies chimed in on some of this stuff. One person saying, I'm a trained bioarchaeologist. I've assisted in autopsies, examined hundreds of sets of remains, waded through chest deep swamps looking for bodies, and excavated burials. You know what I've never done? Owned human remains, because it's disgusting and unethical. She just doesn't get it, okay? She doesn't get it. What John's doing here. He's filling gaps in the market for these bones, okay? We need him. But this really brings up a big question of where did these bones really come from? Because if these are the type of bones, like that native European skull from the Sami people, which, if you didn't know, are still oppressed to this day, and apparently the bones of their ancestors are still being passed around as fun toys. Even back in 2019, Nordic museums have been pushed to return these bones from the people that they were taken from originally. Maybe John would have known that this isn't a great skull to sell if he had a historian on board to actually look into any of this stuff. Where did these bones really come from? Who were these people? And after a lot of pushback, John felt like it was time to answer the real hard questions that he doesn't tell you when you first find out about him.
Hey guys, lately we've been getting a lot of questions about the collection, so I want to make this video to address it. In terms of where the bones come from, they typically came from China, Russia, or India, India being one of the largest suppliers. In India, there was a government-sponsored program that allowed individuals to donate their bodies to science. Unfortunately, throughout history, this ended up being individuals of lower caste systems or seen as the untouchables in society. These skulls were cleaned and prepared in India and then later sold to companies that were then suppliers to institutions and medical professionals. The companies include Kilgore International, Adam Ruley, Milliken and Lonley, Salt and Sons, Carolina Biological Supply, Charles Ward, and Clay Adams. And this is where we source all of our medical remains from. Since most of these companies are either out of business or no longer sell human remains, our goal is to source what's left in the US and try to put them back into the medical field, since the majority of them are in the private market. To confirm that the skull wasn't grave robbed or from any other illegal manner, we make sure that it has the correct preparations or medical markings to infer that it came from one of these companies. So the fundamental problem is over the last 100 years, over 60,000 skulls have been shipped to Europe, the UK, and America, and there's nobody to claim responsibility for it. So what do? Our goal is to make osteology more accessible for everybody, to raise awareness about the bone trade, and to destigmatize the stigmatized industry. That's been the whole goal for this company and this channel, is to create educational content to help raise awareness about the medical bone trade and where these pieces exist in the world today. I hope that answers the majority of your questions, and let me know if you have any more.
Responsibly sourced. So these are bones of poor people whose families couldn't afford to bury them. So instead, they had to be, sold or taken, those unclaimed bodies, remember? Nobody wanted, they were just laying around. Nobody wanted them anymore. And these are the people whose bones are now being passed around as toys, whose bones are being passed around like Pokemon cards, like collector's coins. These are people. But to the people who took these bodies and sold these bodies, and to John, they're just an opportunity for another dollar. Oh, and he thinks they're fun. He thinks they're cool too. I forgot about that. Now, another really important thing to remember is, since these are bodies from really poor people, more likely than not, they didn't really consent to their bodies being taken and used in this way. And that's why I brought up earlier the dates of 1918 to the mid 1980s as being a really important time for where these bones came from. Because more likely than not, that's when these bones really came into the market. That's when these people came into the market. He said a lot of these bones came from India, and I wonder what the social and political landscape of India looked like back then. Oh yeah, they were basically owned by Britain. There was an article written about this, of the heart of India's underground bone trade. What many don't realize is that a large number of these models are stolen from graves in Calcutta, India. For 200 years, this city has been the center of a shadowy network of bone traders who snatch up skeletons in order to sell them to universities and hospitals abroad. In colonial times, British doctors hired thieves to dig up bodies from Indian cemeteries. Despite changes in laws, a similar process is going strong today. So, responsibly sourced. I'm kind of starting to realize why we don't use the E word anymore. So India under British rule, and the British weren't necessarily known for the kindest treatment to Indians in the time, facilitated and paid off thieves to go steal these bodies from cemeteries, or they found some bodies in the Ganges River, or they were given to them by poor people whose family, or if they didn't have any family, no one to claim the body, so they yoinked them up, they yoinked them and sploinked them, they cleaned them and shipped them off to the US and England to be used for medical purposes. And one thing leads to another, the bones bounce around hands, and all of a sudden your relative has ended up in some TikTok twink's bone collection. When I die, when I'm gone, my body will be stolen, says Mohammed Jinnah Vishwas, a farmer who lives in the village of Amdanga. Before, we didn't understand where all the bones were going. Now we know that they were taken by criminals. And so that's the real problem, is that we can say these bones were, I guess we're going to use the word responsibly sourced, because they come from these companies. The problem is the situation that led to these bones coming into the medical bone trade in the first place is where the problem begins. And these people who were enslaved, these people whose countries were taken from them, who had families, who had lives, who had people who loved them, who were systematically oppressed and never got to see a day of what living as a true person would be, are now sold as commodities on a market for more money than some of them would ever see in their entire lifetimes, adjusted for inflation. And someone asked, do they have a napkin? Ko's asking the hard questions. Why do they have a napkin and $1 between their teeth, Lamau? One's a stripper, the other talks too much. Thank you, John, for your endless comedy. Listen, we don't know where these bones really came from, but she's a stripper today, boys. A really big black market supplier called the Young Brothers works to find bones and ruthlessly maintain supply because that's what you have to do there. And a lot of places in India is still a developing country. There's still a lot of poverty. So the place is ripe for more abuse and for more people to try to find ways to make any money. And we have that same problem here, but it comes with things like drugs. Over there, it comes with things like selling people's bodies. They took the bodies from the river, from the graveyard, and from the hospital. More than 5,000 dead bodies I've seen. India was one of the largest suppliers of bones to our country. In 1985, the Chicago Tribune reported that India had exported 60,000 skulls and skeletons the year before. 60,000 in one single year. But the gravy train couldn't last forever, boys. Graveyards in West Bengal were being picked clean, and the lure of ready money soon attracted criminal elements. The industry shuddered to a halt in March 1985. Remember that? Remember when he brought up the years that the bone trade was going on? It ended here. This was one of the big reasons why the bone trade ended. It didn't necessarily end because they were finding much better ways to get bones. No, it ended because they found a group of bone traders who were exporting 1,500 child skeletons. And when the cops asked them where all these skeletons came from, they were like, found them? But I don't think they just found them. Reports said that children were being kidnapped and killed for these bones. And the reason why was because child skulls are sold for more money. They're more expensive. You can see cool development things in there. When you get your adult teeth and the baby teeth pop out, you can see the baby teeth in there. It's super cool. I know John would definitely think it's cool. He studies osteology. I bet he would think it would be super cool, but he sources all of his stuff responsibly. I can imagine there would be no reason for him to have one.
Today I have the honor to show you guys a pediatric skull. In terms of osteological collections, finding a child skull is some of the hardest preparations to find, but they provide amazing insight into human anatomy. Here you can see the teeth that haven't quite erupted yet. This is what's called a demonstrative skull, where you can pull back part of the mandible to see more of the teeth that haven't erupted yet. This is a more sensitive part of medical history, and a lot of these pieces don't survive because they're so old. But I'm glad to be able to show you one today in pristine condition.
What's happening? I'm perfectly fine with weird, quirky hobbies, okay? I'm okay with quirks. Listen, My Hero Academia was one of the first animes I ever watched, okay? I'm fine with quirks. But this just goes too far. The way these bones are handled is kind of infuriating. I do have to say so. Because these are people who never got an opportunity to receive a proper burial. I'm not saying literally every single skull was one that was picked and plundered, but way too many are. And when you can't be 100% sure that this is a skeleton from someone who volunteered for their body to be used in this way, I don't understand how you can feel comfortable just using it, just keeping it, just selling it as another product, as another commodity. Just make a whole business that revolves around the continuation of the commodification, and I would honestly say the dehumanization of these people's remains who never got a chance to have a say in how they were going to be used after they were gone. Almost everything we touch today, and if we don't do something about it as we move into the future, every single thing is going to be a commodity. And I have to say, this is honestly around peak capitalism, if you would think about it. You accumulate and you own and you own and you own until the only thing left to own is other people. Make them your property. And here in a more civilized society, we say that you can't just own people, living people, But the ones who died, apparently they're up for grabs. They're sold to the highest bidder. And I know there are some people around who say things like, oh, who cares how these things are used? I wouldn't care. That's cool if you don't care. It doesn't matter. But if that's the case, you shouldn't be throwing your beliefs onto other people who haven't been able to consent to how their body, it's still their body, is being used. Or the family whose body that came from is never going to be able to give that skeleton, give that person a proper burial in the way that respects them from their culture. They'll never get that. They're just going to collect dust on a TikTok twink's skull shelf and be used for props for him to make more money off of their misfortune. And I'm not necessarily saying that John or anybody who collects the bones are, necessarily bad people. They weren't the ones who engaged in the trade initially, but the continuation of the exploitation of these people, and it seems like without a care for them to actually find a real resting place, or at the very least use their remains for actual medical work and not for fun TikTok videos to collect more clout and get more money. I just can't see how I can get behind this, or anybody else could, without a severe financial gain being one of the main drivers. And it seems that's kind of how it's being used. I was able to find this where he did a giveaway of a human skull, a key, a bunch of teeth. In Salem, Massachusetts, there's a store that just sells human bones, and you can pick from a menu like it's Wendy's of a bunch of these people's bodies. They're someone's family member just sitting here on the shelf as a new curious little thing to have, new statement piece, reduced to nothing but another thing to be bought and to be sold. But if this doesn't bring you on board with my idea that he really doesn't treat these bones with that much respect, take a look at this. We got some Towboy representation in the building now, boys. Can you imagine? Like you walk into someone's house. It's already weird enough that they own like human bones, but instead of my man John's spine collection, he's got his wall of feet, just feet collection, just everything, just toes galore. Listen, the leg bone is connected, not to the knee bone here. It's connected to the bank account. What's happening? And these are the skulls that are listed as medical and teaching skulls, but that's not the entirety of all the skulls that are sold. Not at all. A study was done between 2012 and 2013 that tracked 450 human skulls that were being sold on eBay, and they found 384 being teaching or medical skulls, but there were 56 or 12% that were archaeological or forensic skulls. Like these skulls were of either archaeological and historical or forensic, there's like a murder or something, importance that they wanted to know about. And 12% of those, 56, were there. And there was another 3.1% that were undetermined. Listen, hey man, where'd you get those bones from? I don't know. It's fell out of the sky, something along those lines. You love to see good old California at the top of the chart there, really making it work, guys. You guys are really putting in work out there. But all of this makes it even more clear what his real goal is. Remember earlier we talked about how he gave all of these reasons and justifications for doing what he does.
Hey everyone, just a quick video. The biggest reason I do what I do too is I'm a huge advocate that everyone has the right to education and everyone has the right to learn about human osteology. And I'm someone that actively speaks out about it. Unless you have access to an institution, museum, or college, sometimes seeing these pieces and learning from these pieces can be extremely challenging and hard to get your hands on them. So I want to do my best to provide you guys access to be able to see skeletal remains in the most respectful way possible. So thank you for all the support, guys, and I just really wanted to talk about why I do what I do. My goal is to make this stuff as accessible as possible for you guys.
I can understand how there can be like a mosaic of reasons for doing the things that he does, but he states very clearly that there's one driving force that leads him to doing what he does, and that's to make sure everyone is able to study osteology, own these bones, make a business so your average person can get your hands on someone's family member of some bones that were sold or used in the medical bone trade, or maybe even not. Get your hands on those and use them for however you wish. And I'm not 100% against selling all bones. I mean, unfortunately, in the system that we live in today, where we do have markets, you will have to sell these bones back. And honestly, for them, if you can't find where to put them back, it would be best to either lay them to rest in a sort of communal or ceremonial graveyard or something along those lines. A proper, respectful disposal, that, or make sure that they actually go back into the hands of real medical medical professionals, so they really can be used to save more lives. So their deaths and their bodies being stolen will not be in vain. There will be something good to come out of this that we can take from this awful situation. But this is not how you do it. You don't let just some random person with enough money and who's weird enough who wants to own one of these things to just own them. There are companies out there who do sell bones. The thing is that I can't buy them and you probably can't buy them either. A real doctor has to be able to buy them. You have to show your paperwork. You have to show that you're a medical professional. You have to show that you're going to be using these bones in a respectful way, because they have bones from people who genuinely knew what they were getting themselves into and genuinely wanted their bones to be used for this purpose. And so they're going to stay faithful to that. But the way Jon makes it work, we'll never, ever treat these people with any genuine respect. And that goes for a lot of the other people in the bone trade. They hide behind these words like osteology or other large words to make it feel like they know what they're talking about, and they put on their persona of being a real serious professional, when in actuality they're collectors. They do this for fun. It's fun. It's a fun hobby to buy, sell, and own these bodies. And what makes it even more evident that they really don't care about the preservation of these bodies is that a researcher who was looking into this found that these bones weren't being used for ethical tools, but instead turned into jewelry, into chandeliers, to make sculptures that end up in homemade curios. And Jon isn't any different than that. He's no different from them.
Here I have a real human skull carved by Dolan Carrick. He's a local artist that actually does skull carvings. This is actually quite a rare art form, and there are not many artists that practice this here in the US and overseas. Fun fact, as a gift to me, he actually carved Jon's bones into a real human femur. His work is exquisite, and I highly recommend you check him out.
So I guess that brings me to the idea of like, what is JonsBones? Really? Who is this guy? And I have to be honest with you, I really think this is just someone who has a hobby, they really enjoy it, and they found that it was a good way to make money as well on the side. I don't think Jon thinks that he's a bad person, and I'm not necessarily sure if I'm ready to call him a bad person either. But what he is doing and what he represents of the continuation of human beings as property and commodities and the ethical ramifications of that really leads us down a bad path. I think that it's important to really take care and respect these bodies, because respect for the dead also means respect for the living. I think it says a lot about a person who can't bring themselves at all to respect something that either someone has or someone had or someone who isn't here anymore. If someone is perfectly willing to do whatever to a dead body, even like unprompted, I think that says a lot about a person for what they do when nobody's watching. Like, it's one thing to show all of this respect and everything and follow these sorts of norms, but it's kind of like manners. If you can't bring yourself to actually follow them in some coherent manner, and when nobody is pressuring you, there is no coercion. It's only you and your thoughts that allow you to do what you do once the cameras aren't rolling and you're able to do whatever. I think that's really when people's real intentions and who they really are come out. And for a lot of people, that's not good. And for a lot of people who couldn't care less about how these bodies are treated without the consent of the person whatsoever, or how the family of this person may feel at all, I'm not sure if I can trust that person. Now, I'm not going to say that Jon is necessarily someone who I think is like evil. I do think he's a little unscrupulous with the way that he treats these bones and his complete disregard for actually making sure they're used for medical purposes. I mean, on his TikTok, he always tries to teach about the bones in some way in between goofy, funny, wow, I almost dropped the skull sort of content. But at the end of the day, I really think a lot of this is content. It's someone who has a morbid curiosity with owning human bones and doesn't really want to think about the ramifications that come along with the ideas of what he's really doing to these people. I think that brings us to about the end of the video, huh? I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching so much. I don't get to do these too often, but I'm glad I was able to put it together. That was fun now, wasn't it? And if you're watching for this long, Thank you. I appreciate you. It took a lot of work and a lot of time to put this video together, so I appreciate all the support. You guys have been great to me so far, and I'm really excited for where this community and where this channel goes sometime in the future. If you enjoyed the video, freaking slap that like button, all right? Don't hit your funny bone though. That won't be too good. All right. We don't want them damaged. A bad one wouldn't sell for too much on the market. And if you haven't subscribed, god dang, hit that subscribe button. What are you doing? It's free. It's 100% free. Ring a ding the bell and make a trip over to the Twitch sometime. I think you'll enjoy it. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again soon for another video.